Hello, everyone. My name is Gavin McBride. I am a third year physical therapy student at George Fox, and I'm participating in some interviews with people who have been influential in the OPTA and APTA for their advocacy work. So I'm going to be interviewing Ricci Susick today. She's joining me. She is now retired, but prior to retirement, she was the rehab manager at Providence for a while. So I'll let Ricci introduce herself now.
Okay, well, I was the rehab manager at Providence for 22 years, so that was a while. And I retired about 8 years ago. So I got my degree, my master's degree in the Army program at Baylor University in 1971, before you guys were born, I'm sure. And have done a lot of jobs in my PT career, but one of the most rewarding things I really enjoyed the most was my work with the OPTA and the APTA, and what we used to call government affairs. I don't know what they call it these days.
Awesome. All right, so we have some questions that we're going to ask you, and we're going to lead in with just kind of want to get to know a little bit about your history with advocacy, both in Salem and at the national level in DC. So if you can kind of just tell us a little bit about both of those.
Well, I could make this a really long story because it is long, but I'll try and just condense it a little bit. And when I was manager, before I started at Providence, I was a manager at a hospital system, and a different hospital. And I was a member of the OPTA, but I wasn't really active. I'd never been particularly active. And Dan Jones, I don't know how many of you know the Jones family, the PT in Oregon, the family with they have all, you know, like Dan is the dad, and then Jeff and Zach are the sons, and they're PTs, and then I don't know if some of their kids are PTs now, but Dan called me up one day and said, will you come to the I think they called it legislative committee meeting. He said, we need somebody on our group that's from a hospital, because it was kind of private practice run back in the day. And so I was like, okay, I tend to be a bit of a joiner. So I just said, oh, sure, fine, why not? Anyway, so I went, and I think that was like 1988. And all these people on this committee, there was probably about 8 people or so, and the lobbyist was there. We had a lobbyist, Stephen Kafori back then. And anyway, I didn't know anything. And so I was sort of there, and I just sort of sat there and listened to everything they had to say. And during those time, they were working on direct access, which, you know, is a thing now. Then it was like nobody did that. It was really controversial. And so anyway, that's how I got started. And so sort of as an aside, I think sometimes a personal invite, if you know someone who you think might be interested or might be good to do something, call them up and ask them to come to the meeting. Don't wait for them to sign the paper or whatever, because I don't know, I maybe wouldn't have signed it because I didn't really know that much about it.
Right.
And so I've been a member of that committee and active ever since. Excellent. In the association, locally and nationally, I was the, well, I don't know, am I going on too much?
No, this is perfect. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that committee and found that I really liked learning about our political system and how bills get passed, and how, you know, the lobbyists work, and how we work as a extension of our lobbyists and that sort of thing. And kind of what legislators, you know, support physical therapy, and what legislators are doctors, so they don't want us to get, you know, direct access, dealing with the chiropractors and all that. I mean, it was really interesting and fun. And so I went on to be involved for the rest of my career on that committee, as well as I think I started out as I think I was the treasurer. I was elected a treasurer of the OPTA, and then I was the vice president, and then I was the president of the OPTA for back in the day when we had more than 1-year terms. I think I was for 5 years.
Wow.
I started, once you start doing things, and if you really like it and you kind of get involved, then the APTA had a leadership thing then that they'd invite people to, and you'd go to Washington, D.C. to the APTA headquarters and do all these classes in leadership, association leadership. And then you get to know people on the national level. Yeah. Not only at the APTA, but all the other states. You get to know who are the leaders in other states because they're there with you doing those same classes.
Right.
Anyway, so it just sort of expands your scope of influence, I guess you would say.
Sure. What were some? Oh, go ahead.
That's kind of it.
Perfect. What were some of the things that kept you like motivated to be involved instead of just maybe doing one thing? Because it sounds like you've done this for years. What were some of the things that kept you going in the advocacy work?
Well, for me, like I said, I do like to be involved. If I'm going to be like a physical therapist, then I want to be involved with the decisions. That's why I was kind of the manager type, even back when I was a staff PT. I worked in outpatient and in schools and a bunch of different things. But I like, if there's decisions about my life or my career to be made, I want to have some influence on it. And that's just the way I am. So that's sort of what leads me to be involved. And then secondarily was the people, I mean, not secondarily, but a big thing was the people. I made a lot of contacts and friends through the association. Some of my friends I still get together with are, a PT in Bend and a PT in New Mexico and people like that that I've just met through the association.
Okay.
And worked with that are great friends to this day. And I also felt like as a manager, I felt I had some influence by being so overtly involved with getting other therapists that work there to be involved also.
Okay.
And that was really great too. I enjoyed that. And then I think I really liked the whole political thing and, what's a bill and what's a statute and, who makes the rules and, and it's kind of like a game, it's kind of like a little board game that you play about who's going to influence who, where, and who do you make your friend and who do you want. And then I probably got to go to DC at least 12 times probably or more. And you go up to Capitol Hill, when they were having the riots, I'd been in all those places, and it's, I would have never had that opportunity otherwise.
Right. No, that's really cool. And I think I can relate a little bit. Last year, I got to sit down and kind of be a part of the delegates leading up to the House.
Yeah.
And I just remember each meeting I would leave and just as a student, just kind of sitting and watching. Oregon was nice that they let me participate, but I remember leaving every meeting and just like what you said about it being a game or how do things get accomplished and who says what and what word means what. I thought it was so fascinating. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's awesome.
Did you get to go to the actual House of Delegates at the?
So yes, but this last year it was virtual.
Right.
And I thought that it actually went, having it be created on the fly, I thought that it went really well. And just hearing different regions talk about, their views on a subject or a bill or a motion, because maybe their region does things differently than the West Coast. Right. And being a student, that was really eye-opening that, we are a profession, but each area kind of sees different problems differently.
Exactly.
And I think people like yourself and all the other people who are passionate about advocacy work, there's sitting back and just kind of watching it happen last year, it was interesting watching everyone work together, even if there was differences. Like you said,
Right.
who wanted to be a friend, and there's no enemies, but you can kind of tell that there's this group forming here, and this person has this
Oh
idea.
yeah, for sure.
That was really fascinating as well. Yeah.
So you get people to be on your side, so they'll sort of speak up at the house on regarding whatever your resolution is. What do they call them? RCs, I think. I forget some of that stuff. But
Yeah.
I think every therapist, if they ever can, should go to a House of Delegates, a real one, not a virtual one.
Right.
And even if you're not a delegate, you can sit in the back and watch and stuff. The first time I went to one of those, I was like so amazed that I didn't realize how big and how interesting. I mean, it was just amazing to me the way it was run and what we were doing and the decisions that were being made. It was great.
Awesome.
So get all your friends to go.
I'll try. It's harder. I think one of these next questions will answer how we can help get that to happen. You already kind of touched on this a little bit with how, as you were a manager, you were able to kind of get other people involved in advocacy, but was there any other way that your advocacy work kind of directly impacted your practice or how you were a manager?
Oh, for sure. I always wonder how people who aren't involved in the association can own a clinic or manage a big department or something of therapists, because everything I learned about all the wonderful things about billing and coding and all just how you run your practice, I learned from being involved in our association. Nobody else taught me. And I learned about, you learn about things, the big P word, productivity, and you learn about, what we can do as far as direct access kinds of things, or there's a big thing about dry needling, or how do you, how do you code something so you can get literally paid for it if you do it the correct way. I mean, everything I know or did came from the association, and it allowed me to lead a lot of things at Providence who had been led by people for many, many years who were not involved in the profession at all. And things were not, I'm not bragging, but we were behind. Providence was way behind the curve. And you guys don't understand where we were, though, in those days. Rehab was just something like hospital systems sort of had. They had some PTs and they saw a few patients, and they might have an outpatient clinic inside the hospital somewhere. But all the stuff that we've done to show them that we are a viable, not only can we make profit, so to speak, for them, but we make people better so they don't have to be a big cost to the system. All that stuff that you learn.
Yeah.
They didn't ever think of rehab that way before. It was just sort of like you had to have PT. It was part of what people did. And the only real outpatient stuff was private practices. That was all it was. And I feel like when I started, and we started like with other people at Providence, started saying, no, this is what we do. We need to open a clinic here, because people don't want to come to the hospital to have outpatient. We started opening satellites. We did all that. And seriously, I would have never, ever been in that position to lead that kind of stuff, or maybe not lead it, but influence it, if I hadn't known what I know from being in the association.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome.
Everything. It was everything.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And as a young, new professional PT, just, thank you for all the work that you have done.
Oh, well, you're
'Cause
welcome.
I don't know if it resonates, you know, we don't hear stories like this. This is the first story that I've even heard of, you know, someone laying the groundwork to, I think I almost feel bad in a way, you know, we just take it for granted that PT is a doctoral profession and doctors are starting to take us more seriously, you know. And I think there's still obviously room to grow, but I wasn't around when PTs were what you were just talking about. And so
Yeah.
if it's something that I'm passionate about or all of my classmates are, you know, that's a really interesting story to hear because we don't think about all the work that, or, you know, that somebody had to do to get us to where we are now. So that's,
Right. Well, you know, just recently, one of the big names in PT in Oregon, Clem Eischen, died. And he was probably 10 years or so older than me, maybe 10 or 12, I don't know. He was like a big name when I came, but his son, George Eischen, and George's son, what's his name, Kevin or something, they own a bunch of private practices. And Clem was one of the big names, and he literally was one of the PTs who was able, through legislative efforts in Washington, D.C., to get Medicare to pay for physical therapy.
wow.
Because Medicare didn't even recognize physical therapy as a health care thing that they should pay for. We were kind of like, I don't know what they, massage therapists or whatever that don't get paid for, you know, chiropractors. What, I mean, we were in that lump of just those people, you know, people who didn't have our education or any, you know.
Wow.
And that was probably, I graduated from PT in 71, PT school. It was probably like 68 that Clem and his cohorts got Medicare on board to reimburse for physical therapy.
Cool. Yeah.
And I know it probably seems like ancient history to you, but in my life, that doesn't seem that long ago, really.
Right. And yeah, I mean, who knows what's to come later, but I think it's important to hear that, you know, these changes don't just happen because we do good work. You know, we do good work, but then there's people like yourself and all the other, you know, advocacy members that really help kind of drive the profession forward. So I think,
well, it just doesn't happen. You gotta work for it, fight for it,
right.
make it happen.
So what advice would you have for those of us that might not know, or maybe might not know, or might not have the ambition to really be on the front lines? How can those sort of individuals and professionals support like people like yourself? Like, how can other people support advocacy without actually traveling to DC or being involved like a delegate?
Well, I think that's hard because it's hard to have the will or the, you know, the, like you say, the motivation to do it if you aren't like really into it. But I guess for me, it would be things like, I don't know that they do this anymore, but we used to have a legislative day where we'd take a whole bunch of PTs and students to the Capitol in Oregon, and we would set up booths and we'd talk to legislators. We might do some, you know, back eval or, you know, little things like you do at exhibit hall type things, you know.
Sure.
And, you know, the more people, legislators believe it, I mean, it as people get sort of disgusted with politics, you know, and it's all about money. Well, it kind of is, you know, it costs a lot for them to run a campaign. And so people who support us, then if you donate to the PAC in Oregon, which I don't see why every single therapist doesn't, because you get the money back. It's a tax credit in Oregon. It's not like even what do you call it? A deduction. It is an actual credit. You get the actual amount back off your taxes. But anyway.
That's good information.
So we tell it. Do you know how many times poor, what's his name, the new president?
Of OPTA or APTA?
OPTA.
Oh,
red hair. Jeremy.
Yeah.
That's his name. Is that his name? No, Jeremy? No.
I'm pretty sure it's Jeremy.
I am getting old, my memory, because I know him so well. He was one of the kids, you know, that we brought up, and now he's going to be president. But anyway, Jeremy Hilliard, yeah.
Yeah.
I think his name. Anyway, and I remember anyway, that's a whole nother story. But where was I? Oh, how can people get involved? Okay. Give to the PAC, because we got to give money to politicians who support us. We have to support them if we want them to support us. That's one.
Okay.
Number two, that's the easiest thing you can do, really. I mean, what's $50?
Right.
You can go, you know, you go out to dinner for that.
Used to be
second thing, if we ask you to like call your legislator or, you know, give you a form letter to send, that is the second thing that you can do, and it's fairly easy. And that's the thing, people don't really want to do it because it's kind of a hassle and they don't get it, you know, it's not important to them. The third thing is get to know your legislators. If you have somebody in your neighborhood, you know, or maybe your doctor, or maybe your father's friend or whatever, you know, is in the legislature, get to know them, get them to know what PT is and support you, you know, because money is important and relationships with legislators. That's what they respond to the most.
Good information. All right, so our last question here is, and it sounds like you've had a lot of wins during your time working with the OPTA and APTA, but if you had to choose maybe one of the most, maybe not your biggest win, but maybe your most influential win, or what are you most proud about during your time working within the legislative part of the APTA?
That is a hard question. I mean, I have an answer, but it's sort of a pat answer. But I will say that one of the things about anything to do with advocacy, legislatures, all that sort of stuff, both state and national, is very slow. And, you know, I mean, you just have to be patient. And people who don't really quite understand the process of what it takes to actually make some sort of change legislatively, I think they just get kind of, if they're not involved and don't kind of enjoy the game part of it, and I'm not a patient person, so this was not the easy part for me. You have to be patient because it goes years, you know, you're building relationships, you're going back, you're fighting with the chiropractors, and the chiropractors are out of favor in the legislature. So then it's your turn to try and really push something through while the chiropractors can't stop you. I mean, it's very, very slow and incremental. So did I have like these huge, big things that I ever did, or, you know, and it was some big explosion? No. But when I told you that we were working on direct access in 1988, when I started on the legislative committee or government affairs or whatever they call it now, we were one of the original states to get direct access. But it was really funny because not only did we had this committee that had a doctor and 2 PTs and whatever to decide who could have direct access, and you had to take this certain educational thing. And I mean, it was totally encumbered. I mean, it was ridiculous because this committee didn't really know what they were. I mean, it was just putting blockades in our way so we wouldn't really get real direct access. Fast forward, or I should say slow forward to, gosh, when was it? It was, you know, at least 10 years or more later when we got direct access, but that committee went away, but we still had some sort of educational requirement that you had to do in order to, you know, be able to do direct access.
Sure.
And then flow forward another, I don't know how many years it was, still finally we got it so that we have direct access, period. Legally, we have direct access. Now, the caveat is that insurance companies who pay the bills still can make their own little rules.
Right.
But for the most part, I feel like, at least when I was still in the workforce, most insurances would let a patient come to a therapist and they would pay for it for, sometimes they said 6 visits, or, you know, they always put a little caveat here and there. But it had expanded. So we basically had unencumbered direct access.
That's awesome.
I mean, and I'm talking 20 years probably.
Yeah.
15, 20, I don't know. I can't
Like
remember
what
the
a
date.
change too, from just kind of being a part of healthcare to really being a member of the healthcare team. Yeah, that's huge.
Really? I
Cool.
mean, it's crazy that and it's crazy that it took that. You know, and every state is different. I don't know how familiar with all. One of my examples right now is dry needling. You know,
Yeah.
people want to do dry needling. Well, some state legislatures have said yes, it is in the scope of practice of PTs. Others have no. It's acupuncture, and I think in Oregon they don't see it as in our scope. I don't know if something's changed on that.
No, yeah, from my understanding, no, it's not yet, but that's one of the big advocacy pushes right now to have that
Right.
be. Yeah.
And that's something too, you know, in our committees and both statewide and nationally, you have to determine, you know, what do you want to fight for this year or this season, you know, because, you know, and our lobbyists really help us with that, because they'll know, you know, that's not going to go anywhere this year because of blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, the chiropractors are, you know, aren't very active. So it might be something, because almost any bill that you get a legislator to sponsor, you go and you testify in a committee hearing of like the House Healthcare Committee or the Senate Healthcare Committee. And you get to know who the legislators are on that and who the chair people are. The chair people have all the power, whether or not they'll even hear the arguments, let alone pass it out of committee to go to the full House or the full Senate. And if anybody stands up and opposes it, whether it be the orthopedic surgeons, which was a big opposition group to us being more independent. Chiropractors have always been a big group that you know, doesn't want us to get power, so to speak. Right. Anybody opposes it, then the committee just doesn't want to deal with it, because they don't want to deal with arguments. They don't want to deal with fights. I mean, maybe eventually they will, but they'll say basically, you guys work this out and come back, you know, with something that you can all agree on. So it's hard. It's very hard to get something through the legislature. But I have learned that that's really a good thing, because if bills and things could just go, oh yeah, it sounds good, do it, then you're going to get some really weird laws that probably may not be good for people, and that's what they're supposed to be looking out for, is their constituents.
Perfect. I just want to say thank you for your time. A lot of this information was really just kind of great to hear and learn about, and I hope that those listening to this find it just as entertaining as I did. And I think that folks like yourself who have laid the groundwork, I know that it's motivating for myself entering the field as a professional to continue to just serve. And you know, we don't want to let you guys down laying all that work and then let it go nowhere. So it's motivation for me.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you listening. I have a lot more. If you ever want to go have a glass of wine, I can tell you a lot more things.
Perfect.
But I appreciate young people like yourself getting involved and sort of carrying on the legacy. I would hate to see it kind of falter again. And the APTA, I think, has really grown into a very good representative body and really helps us stay on track. And I really think you should be involved in both.